She was standing in the middle of a street covered in flowers, holding a card with 4 words on it, and her hands were shaking. Not because she was sad, because she recognized the handwriting. And the name attached to that handwriting was the one name in Seoul she had spent 6 months trying very hard not to think about. She stood there in her house slippers. Yes, she had run downstairs in her house slippers, surrounded by enough white peonies to fill an entire wedding venue, on a Tuesday morning in her pajamas, with her hair not done, looking like someone who had absolutely no plan for this moment. None. And the only thought in her head was, he knew. He had always known. Then her second thought came, quieter and somehow much worse. Did I? To understand why 4 words on a small card cracked something open in Sila Dilamini that a broken engagement couldn't, you need to go back. Back to a grocery store in Seoul on a perfectly ordinary Saturday morning, to 2 brothers standing in the same aisle, and to one split second that rerouted everything, because one of them stopped to help a stranger, and the other one didn't. But here is the part nobody tells you about that story. The one who stopped to help the stranger, he didn't forget what he missed. He just decided to wait. Hold on to that. And if you are brand new here, welcome to Afro-Soul Diaries by D. Subscribe right now, because this story is going to have you making decisions in the comments that you weren't expecting to make today. Okay, let's go. Sila Dilamini was 26 years old, originally from Cape Town, South Africa, and on this particular Saturday morning she was completely, embarrassingly lost in a Korean grocery store. Not emotionally, physically. She had been trying to find dried fish for 20 minutes and had ended up in the snack aisle 3 separate times, which, if you have never experienced a Korean snack aisle, is actually a trap. You go in for one thing and you come out with 6 things you didn't budget for and a mild personality change. She was a food product analyst. Her company had partnerships with South African agricultural exporters and needed someone on the ground in Seoul who could sit in rooms with Korean executives and African suppliers and translate not just language, but context, culture, the small things that either build trust or quietly destroy it. Sila could do that. She had grown up between 2 worlds, 1 foot in Cape Town's rhythm and 1 foot in her grandmother's kitchen in Soweto, where nothing happened quickly and everything tasted like it had been thought about for a week before it touched the pot. She was good at her job. She was also, right now, standing in the wrong aisle again, holding a mango up to the light and muttering to herself in Zulu about its ripeness, completely unbothered by the look she was getting. "That one's not ready," said a voice behind her. "See how the skin near the stem is still pulling tight? Give it 2 more days." She turned around. Kyumin Shin was the kind of man who looked like someone had assembled him with very specific standards. Tall, sharp-featured, well-dressed without appearing to try, and he had the easiest smile she had ever seen on a person, the kind that arrives on a face like it was already there waiting, just looking for a reason to show up. "You know mangoes," she said. "My mother is obsessed with them. I have been selecting mangoes for this woman since I was 12 years old. I know mangoes." Sila looked at him, looked at the mango, then she put it back. "Show me the right one," she said. He did, and somewhere between choosing fruit and discovering they both had opinions about the same thing for wildly different reasons, she laughed twice and gave him her number. What she did not notice, because she was laughing and because Kyumin had this way of filling every inch of a room, was the man who had been standing at the far end of that aisle before any of this started. Taller, quieter, dark ink running up both forearms like a second language. He was holding a grocery basket in one hand, and he had gone completely, perfectly still. He wasn't watching them exactly. He was watching her. He had actually seen her first, had been moving toward her 2 steps in, when an elderly woman near the end cap grabbed his sleeve and pointed desperately toward a jar sitting too high on the shelf. And Yunho, because of something in him that this whole story will slowly reveal, stopped. He helped her. He got the jar down, made sure she was steady on her feet, made sure she had what she needed. He turned back around. Kyumin was already there, already smiling, already making her laugh. Yoonho stood at the far end of the aisle and watched his brother get her number, and something in his chest did a very quiet thing. Not loud, not dramatic, just a settling, a decision made without words. He picked up the mango she had put back, set it correctly on the shelf. Then he walked away. Nobody saw any of that. But it happened. And it matters more than anything else in this entire story. His name was Yoonho Shin, Kyumin's older brother. He had seen her first. Now Kyumin, to be completely fair, was not a bad man at the start. That is what makes this complicated. If he had been obviously terrible, this story would be shorter and far less interesting, and Sela would have noticed much sooner. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who called when he said he would call and remembered what you told him 3 conversations ago. He made Sela feel, in a city where she often had to work twice as hard to feel seen, like someone genuinely worth paying attention to. And when you are 26 in a foreign country building something from scratch, that is not a small thing. He learned 3 phrases in Zulu. He pronounced all of them incorrectly. He was so completely unbothered by how badly he said them that she found it endearing instead of embarrassing. He argued with her about food, passionately, ridiculously, with his whole chest, and he lost gracefully every single time she proved him wrong, which was often. She liked him. More than liked him. By month 3, she was in love. By month 5, she was leaving things at his apartment without noticing. The specific brand of Robust tea she'd brought from home, sitting in his cabinet. Her body lotion next to his bathroom sink. Chapstick on the nightstand. Small migrations. The kind that happen when your body has made a decision your brain hasn't announced yet. She met Yoonho properly at a family dinner in Seongbuk-dong. Kyumin had described him as a lot, which told Sela almost nothing and somehow told her everything at the same time. She built a vague picture in her head, serious, reserved, maybe a little difficult to talk to. She was not prepared. Dinner had been going for 20 warm, easy minutes. His parents were lovely. His mother had already held Sela's hand twice across the table and complimented her skin in a way that was genuine enough to almost make Sela emotional. His father kept quietly refilling her glass like it was a personal mission. And then the front door opened, and something in the room just shifted. Not dropped, shifted. The way a song changes key and everything that came before it suddenly sounds like it was only preparation. Yoonho walked in and Sela's first thought, before she had a chance to arrange it into something more dignified, was, that is genuinely not fair. He was taller than she had imagined, broader. The tattoos she could see climbing up from his hands and winding around his forearms and disappearing into the neck of his shirt were detailed in a way that made them look like they had been decided carefully, not just placed. His face was the kind that certain rooms reorganized themselves around, and he moved like a man who had never once in his life been uncertain about where he was going. He sat across from her, looked at her. "You're Sela," he said, not a question. "You're Yoonho," she said back, also not a question. A beat. "Welcome," he said, just that word, low, measured, like it was carrying something heavier than 4 letters. She looked away first. She would think about that later, why she was always the one who looked away first. The dinner was warm and easy, and she told herself she had forgotten that moment quickly. 6 months in, Kyumin proposed. He filled the restaurant with white peonies. She had mentioned exactly once in passing that they were her favorite flower, and he had remembered. He booked a private room so there was no audience, no performance. Just the 2 of them and a question asked in a voice that had the smallest tremor in it, which was the thing that actually got her. Because she had not known he was nervous. It made him seem more real. She said yes. She called her parents that night. She was their only child, the complete weight of their love and hope and worry concentrated entirely on her. And when her mother heard the news, the sound she made was so enormous that Sela had to hold the phone away from her ear and grin at the ceiling. "My baby," her mother kept saying, "my only baby is getting married." Her father waited for the crying to subside, then came on the line and said simply, "Is he a good man, Sela?" "Yes, Daddy." "Good," he said, "that's everything." She saw Yunho the morning after the engagement. He came by Kuman's apartment early, said he needed to collect something. She didn't fully catch what, and when he came out of the back room and found her in the kitchen making tea, he stopped in the doorway. When she had walked in earlier, she had noticed 3 phones on the kitchen counter, one of them ringing with no name on the screen. Yunho had reached past her without a word and silenced it, not even glancing at it, the way you silence something you have already decided not to deal with. She held up her left hand without thinking, because the ring was still new enough to catch her by surprise every time she noticed it. He looked at it, just for a moment. Then he looked at her face, and whatever was in his expression moved across it so fast, she nearly convinced herself she had imagined it. "Congratulations," he said. "Thank you." "He's lucky," he said quietly. And then he left. She stood in the kitchen holding her mug, wearing her ring, and something sat in her chest that she had no intention of looking at directly. And now, this is the part I need you to really pay attention to. Because everything that happens later only makes sense if you understand what was happening in the background, while Sela's life was moving forward in the foreground. From the night of that family dinner, the very first time he sat across from her, the first time she looked away first, Yunho had quietly made one standing arrangement. A restaurant in Seongbuk-dong, small, private, not the kind of place that shows up on any food recommendation list, the kind you only find out about if someone who knows things tells you. He booked a private booth, prepaid it, every single week. White peonies on the table. Because he had noticed, without anyone telling him, without any prompting, that she had slowed down once in front of a flower stall near the market. Her whole face had changed for just 1 second, the way faces do when they stumble across something they love before the thinking brain has time to process it. That involuntary softness. He noticed. So he booked the table, paid for it every week. He did not know when exactly the right moment would come. He did not know how. He just knew it would, the way certain people simply know things with a confidence that has nothing to do with logic. And when it did, he was not going to be the man helping someone with a jar on a high shelf while something irreplaceable walked past. That booth sat there every single week, fresh white peonies, untouched. Week after week. While Sela fell in love with his brother. While she said yes to a proposal. While she planned a future. 41 weeks. And she had absolutely no idea. This next part matters. It happened on a Thursday evening. She had left work early because of a headache that had settled behind her left eye and shown no signs of moving. She took the subway home. She stopped at a convenience store for pain medication. She climbed the stairs of her apartment building with her shoes already half off by the time she reached her own floor. She turned her key. She pushed the door open. She stood in the doorway for exactly 4 seconds. "I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to spend too much time on this part. Not because it isn't important, it is, but because Sela herself didn't give it more space than it deserved. And I think that's worth respecting." The woman was someone from Kuman's office. Someone Sela had met at a work event. Someone who had smiled at her and asked her for a restaurant recommendation. 4 seconds in the doorway. Then Sela took off the ring, placed it on the kitchen counter by the door, and walked back out. She sat in the stairwell for a while. She did not cry yet. She opened her phone and pressed play on a voice note from her mother. Her mother sent voice notes instead of texts because she said texts had no tone and could mean absolutely anything, which is honestly the most correct thing anyone has ever said. And she just listened to her mother talk about the neighbor's new cat and the tomato prices at the market, and absolutely nothing important. Then she went home to her own apartment, the one she had always kept fully hers, separate from Cumin's, because some part of her had apparently known to do that, and she called her best friend in Cape Town. Her best friend Amara said, in a tone of magnificent and completely unsurprised authority, "I never liked him. I said what I said from the very beginning. Do you need me to fly out?" "No, Amara. I will permanent offer, say the word. Go to sleep. I'm just saying, the standing offer exists." She broke up with Cumin the next morning, 3-minute phone call. She let him give his full explanation, which was long and carefully constructed and not entirely convincing. She even nodded a few times, which he couldn't see, but it helped her feel like a reasonable adult having a reasonable conversation. Then she said, "I'm going to block your number now," and she did it while he was still mid-sentence. She packed every item of his that had migrated into her apartment into a single bag and left it downstairs with her doorman. The note read, "Cumin Shin, please collect." Then she made robust tea, sat on her couch and said out loud to no one in the room, "Okay, fine, okay." And here is the thing about Sila Dlamini that you need to know. She was not the kind of woman who fell apart in a loud or dramatic way. She was the kind of woman who got organized when she was in pain. Her apartment had never been cleaner than it was in the 2 weeks after the breakup. She rearranged the kitchen. She started running in the mornings. The first 3 days were honestly a little embarrassing. 4 minutes on day 1 before she had to stop and question her life choices. But by week 2, she was doing 35 minutes without stopping and feeling quietly, genuinely superior about it. She found a South African and West African food pop-up near Hongdae, run by a Yoruba woman named Bissy who had been in Seoul for 11 years. Bissy made a babodi-style dish using Korean spices that had absolutely no business working as well as it did. Sila became a regular. She tried new restaurants alone, ordered things she couldn't fully read on the menu, sat at tables by herself without her phone, ate well and slowly, and without anyone else setting the pace. She was okay. More than okay. She was starting to feel like herself again, like the version of herself that had existed before she started filling in someone else's gaps with her own hope. She was nearly there. And then Mr. Beek called. Mr. Beek was her building's doorman. He had worked that building for 11 years. In all that time, he had communicated with residents almost exclusively through nods and a clipboard and quiet competence. He had never once initiated a phone call to anyone who lived there. So when his name appeared on her screen at 8:43 on a Tuesday morning, Sila sat up very straight. "Mr. Beek." A pause. He sounded not like himself. Uncertain was not a word she had ever associated with Mr. Beek. "Miss Sila, there is a delivery. We are not entirely sure what to do with it." She came downstairs in her house slippers, her hair not done, her pajamas on. She was not prepared. The lobby doors opened. The street outside her building was flowers. Not a delivery, not a bouquet, flowers. A sea of them. White peonies in enormous arrangements, deep burgundy roses, trailing greenery she didn't have a name for, covering the pavement from the entrance of her building all the way out to the curb. Mr. Beek and the building security guard stood at the entrance looking genuinely, personally baffled. 2 of her neighbors had stopped on their way to work and were just standing there with their mouths open. Mr. Beek held out a small cream envelope. She took it with numb fingers. She looked at it. She looked at the flowers. She told herself, consciously, deliberately told herself, this is Cumin. This is exactly the kind of gesture he would make. He found out I unblocked him for 30 seconds and he escalated. This is him. She opened the card. 4 words. I'm glad he failed. No name. But there was a handwriting she had seen exactly once, on a birthday card passed around a family dinner table, neat and unhurried. The writing of someone who takes their time, because they mean every stroke. She stood in the middle of that street full of flowers, in her house slippers, and her hands did something unreliable. She looked up at Mr. Beak, who was still holding his clipboard and writing nothing on it. Give them to the building, she said. All of them, share them among every apartment. She went back upstairs. She sat on her couch. Then she did something she had not planned to do. She unblocked Cumin just long enough, just for the 30 seconds it took to type. Tell your brother to stop. Send. 3 minutes. Cumin, what did he do? What are you even talking about? She stared at that response for a moment. Then she went to a contact she had saved months ago and never once opened. Yoonho, Cumin's brother. And she typed. I know it was you. Don't do that again. His reply came in 22 seconds flat. Did you like them? She put the phone face down. Picked it up. Put it face down. That is not the point. Then what is the point? She sat there for 60 full seconds. Then she got up, got her keys, put on actual real shoes, not slippers. She was going somewhere and she got in her car. She told herself for the entire 20-minute drive across Seoul that she was going because some conversations were too important for a screen, that this needed to be said clearly, directly, and in person. She was very convincing. She almost believed herself. She pressed his buzzer. Half a minute. The door opened. Gray sweatpants, no shirt, and the tattoos in full daylight up close were even more deliberate than she had realized. They moved up from his hands and wound up both arms, intricate and dark, patterns she couldn't trace without starring, so she committed very firmly to looking at his face instead, which was not significantly easier to deal with but was at least socially acceptable. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. You got my flowers, he said. I told you not to send them. You told me that by text, he said. I am telling you now, in person. You drove all the way here, he said. Yes. 20 minutes at least. Yes. You could have called. I know. Could have texted again. I know. Could have sent me a legal letter if you really wanted to be thorough. There was no smile on his face when he said it, just that steadiness, watching her. She stared at him. So why did you come, Sela? She opened her mouth, and a pause stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just honest, just long enough to say everything she hadn't said. Because some things, she said, should be said to someone's face. And the thing you're saying to my face is, don't send flowers. Yes. That's all. Yes. He looked at her the way someone looks at a sentence written in a language they know perfectly well, that someone else is insisting is written in code. Can I tell you something? He said. Yoon-ho. That day in the market, he leaned into the doorframe. I saw you first. The sentence was quiet. It landed anyway. I was already moving toward you, he said. There was an elderly woman at the end of the aisle who needed a jar off a high shelf. I went to help her. I got the jar down. I made sure she was steady. By the time I turned back around, he paused. Cumin was already there, already making you laugh. He held her gaze. I watched him get your number. She was very still. I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty, he said. I am telling you because I have been carrying it for a long time. And I think you came here today because some part of you already knew something, and I am done pretending otherwise. You don't know why I came here, she said. No, he agreed simply, but you do. A beat. She looked at him. How long, she asked, before she could stop herself. He held her gaze steadily. Long enough that since the evening of our first family dinner, I have had a standing reservation at a restaurant in Seongbuk-dong. Private booth, your favorite flowers on the table, paid for it every week, because I knew the right moment would come, and I did not want to miss it a second time. She went very still. Every week, she said. Every week. The silence between them had weight. You paid for an empty table, she said slowly, for 41 weeks. I prefer to think of it as a table that was waiting, he said, and there was something in his voice, not arrogance, nothing that simple, something patient, something that had been decided a long time ago and had never wavered. She laughed. She didn't mean to. It came out of her surprised and real, and she pressed her hand over her mouth immediately like she could take it back. He smiled then, a real one, the kind that rearranged his entire face, the composure cracking open just slightly, and underneath it was a man who had clearly been waiting a very long time for exactly this particular sound. Tell me to leave you alone, he said. The smile settled into something more serious. Say it. I'll close this door, cancel the reservation. You will never receive another flower from me as long as you live. Say it. She held his gaze. The seconds moved. And if I don't say it, she asked. He exhaled, slow and complete, like something that had been held for a very long time finally releasing. Then, he said quietly, you should probably come inside. I have conditions, she said. He stepped back from the doorframe. Obviously, he said. And Sila Di Lamini, who had driven 20 minutes across Seoul in real shoes to tell a man to stop sending her flowers, walked through the door. Inside, the apartment was quieter than she'd expected. She looked around, and there it was again, that feeling she had no name for. This is the man whose brother I almost married. What kind of person does that make me? Then he crossed to the kitchen without a word and came back with a glass of water, set it on the table beside her without asking, and adjusted the lamp so it wasn't aimed directly at her face. The thought dissolved before she could finish it. Now, here is what you need to understand about Yoonho Shin. Yoonho ran things in Seoul. Not the kind of things that show up in business directories or annual reports. The kind that move through the city's undercurrent, private arrangements, protected networks, the quiet flow of money and information and influence between people who had no interest in documentation. In certain rooms, the mention of his name was enough to end a conversation or begin one, depending on what was needed. He had grown up in the same house as Kyungmin. Same parents, same neighborhood, same pine-scented garden. But they had taken completely different roads out of it, and by the time they were both adults, the gap between those roads was large enough that the two brothers existed mostly in parallel, civil when required, distant otherwise. Yoonho was not simple. He was not safe in the way that word is usually used, but he had a code that was, in certain ways, stricter than anything you'd find in a conventional legal framework. He did not bring his world into spaces where it didn't belong. He did not use people who hadn't entered his world deliberately. Anyone who had ever walked away from him had done it with their safety and their dignity fully intact. He was, above all, the kind of man who noticed things other people didn't notice, like which flowers made a woman's face change for just one involuntary second in front of a market stall. The part Sila would understand only gradually, in the weeks that followed, in the small things she started to notice, was how the world arranged itself differently around him. The way the owner of the Seongbukdong restaurant greeted him with a slight bow and immediate, wordless attention. The way certain people on certain evenings gave him a very wide, very deliberate amount of space. And the way he kept certain doors in his life not locked, exactly, but closed, not because he didn't trust her, but she eventually understood because he did. The protection was the point. That was one of the ways he loved. Sila didn't know all of this on the day she walked through his door. She was about to find out. What grew between them built itself quietly, before either of them named it, before it had a shape anyone could point to. He was not demonstrative the way Kyungmin had been, no carefully timed gestures, no milestones marked and celebrated. What Yunho offered instead was a presence so consistent and so total that it felt like a completely different language. He texted her in the mornings, not long messages, sometimes just her name with a question mark. His way of asking if she was okay. He remembered things she said once in passing and appeared with them later without announcement. The crackers she had mentioned going well with a particular cheese, a book by an author she had referenced in one sentence 2 weeks earlier, a jacket she had seen in a window, touched briefly, and talked herself out of. She asked him once how he retained all of it. He said, "I have been paying attention to you for over a year. At this point it is just practice." She changed the subject immediately, because she did not know what else to do with that sentence. He took her to the restaurant in Seongbuk-dong 3 weeks in. Their booth, low light, the white peonies fresh, exactly as they had apparently been every single week for nearly a year. The food came, and yes, it had been chosen with her in mind. She could feel it in every element, the spice levels exactly where she would have put them, the tea at the temperature she preferred without her asking, and then dessert arrived without her ordering it. She raised an eyebrow. "You always want dessert," he said, without looking up from his menu. "You always pretend that you don't." "I do not." "You looked at the bottom of the menu first, 3 separate times." "That," she said, pointing at him, "is surveillance. That is a recognized form of surveillance." "That," he said, completely unbothered, "is paying attention." "There should be a legal limit," she said with great dignity, "on how well a person is allowed to know you without your permission." He looked up. "File the complaint. I will gladly wait." She laughed so hard she had to put her fork down. And he watched her laugh, with this expression of quiet and completely private satisfaction. Like this was something he had waited a long time to be close enough to witness, and had no intention of rushing past. She felt something arrange itself in her chest into a shape she recognized, and she thought, "This is going to be complicated." Yunho's world was always there. It didn't announce itself dramatically. It just sat in the background of everything, a low frequency you couldn't turn off, present even when nothing was visibly happening. She noticed it in stages. The phone calls he took in other rooms, voice dropping to something she couldn't hear. The men who were sometimes outside his building when she arrived, who nodded at her with a particular kind of deference that was clearly less about politeness and more about who she was to him. The way his name made certain people in certain rooms become suddenly, completely attentive. She told herself it was fine, that it wasn't her world, that it didn't touch her. But here is something that nobody had accounted for, including Sela herself. It was also, quietly and without her planning it, the beginning of a revenge she never set out to take. Not the loud kind, not the kind you announce, the kind that happens when you simply choose something real over something that hurt you, and the person who hurt you has to watch it from the outside. She was not doing this at Cumin. She was doing this for herself. She was not thinking about him when she was with Yunho, and that, it turned out, was the most devastating part. Because Cumin was watching. Seoul, despite being an enormous city, has a way of staying small when you most want it to be large. He saw them for the first time at a restaurant in Mapo. He had come in with a work colleague, spotted Sela at a corner table across the room, and started to raise his hand to wave, and then he saw who was sitting across from her. Yunho, in a dark jacket, leaning forward slightly, the way he only did when something had his full attention, and Sela was laughing, not politely, not for show, but the real version, the one where she briefly forgot to manage her expression. Cumin lowered his hand. His colleague asked if he knew her. "She's my ex-girlfriend," he said. "Oh, the pause, who's he?" Cumin picked up his menu, "My brother." The silence at that table after that sentence was the loudest thing in the room. He called Sela that same night. She didn't answer. He sent a message, "We should talk." She read it, didn't reply. He stared at his phone for a long time. He tried Yoonho next. They met at a cafe near the family home, neutral territory, which in itself said something about how much had already shifted between them. Kyumin sat across from his brother and said, keeping his voice very controlled, "You could have told me." Yoonho looked at him. "Told you what?" "That you had feelings for her before. You could have said something." Yoonho picked up his coffee. "And you would have done what? Stepped back, not gone to get her number that day." Kyumin didn't answer. "Right," Yoonho said, not cruel, just honest. "I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. She was with you. I waited." "You waited," Kyumin repeated. Something in his voice went flat. "You call that waiting?" "Yes," Yoonho said simply. The quietness of it was somehow worse than any argument, because there was no performance in it. No guilt, no defensiveness. Just Yoonho, calm and certain, the way he was always calm and certain, and Kyumin sitting across from him realizing for the first time that this was not a competition he had any tools to enter. "You always do this," Kyumin said, and now something was cracking under the surface of his voice. You move through everything like nothing touches you and you take." "She's not a thing I took," Yoonho said, quiet, clear. "She left you, Kyumin. She left because of what you did. I didn't take anything." Silence. "She never laughed like that with me," Kyumin said after a moment, very quietly, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. Yoonho looked at his brother, and for a moment, just a moment, something in his expression softened. Because Kyumin was his brother, because this was real loss, even if it was deserved. "I know," Yoonho said. "That was all. It was enough to break something. Now here is where you should pay attention, because this is the part of the story where Kyumin makes a decision. And the decision is either brave or deeply stupid, depending on how generous you are feeling." He called Sela. She answered, not because she wanted to, but because she had decided that avoiding him was costing her more energy than just hearing whatever he had to say and being done with it. "I need you to know something about Yoonho," he said. His voice was controlled, careful, the voice of a man who had rehearsed. "Kyumin. There was a woman. Her name was Yina. She was involved with him, with his world, and then she was gone. People who know him talk about it. I am not trying to interfere. I just need you to be careful." Sela was quiet. "Thank you for telling me," she said. She hung up. She sat with it for 2 days. Not because she fully believed him, she knew Kyumin well enough to hear strategy underneath sincerity, but because she also knew she didn't have the full picture of who Yoonho was, and she was not the kind of woman who ignored things she needed to know. So she went to Bissy. Bissy, who had been in Seoul for 11 years and knew its undercurrents the way you know a city when it has shown you its actual face rather than its tourist front. Sela asked careful, well-placed questions, not Yoonho by name, just how certain kinds of operations worked, what the codes were, what separated the men who ran things with any kind of integrity from the ones who simply had power and used it carelessly. Over 3 conversations, across a week. The picture that assembled itself was not simple, but it was not the picture Kyumin had painted either. Yina Cho had been involved with Yoonho's network by her own decision. When she had wanted to leave, Yoonho had arranged her exit himself, safely, cleanly. She was in Kyoto now, someone confirmed through a chain of knowing, living quietly, on her own feet. She had not disappeared. She had been helped out. And the story Kyumin had told, the version with the weight of a dark implication underneath it, that version was built from the bones of a real thing, arranged to say something the real thing did not actually say. Sela sat with that for an afternoon. Then she went to Yoonho. She told him everything, Kyumin's call, the questions she had asked, what she had found. He listened, his face was still. "You went looking," he said. "Yes." "On your own?" "Yes." He exhaled slowly through his nose. Sila, if the wrong people had realized that someone was pulling at those threads in connection with my name. I was careful. You don't know what careful has to look like inside my world. Then, she said, instead of closing doors, show me where the edges are, because I am not a woman who can operate blind. You need to know that about me. He looked at her. Something crossed his face, brief, real, and unguarded. The expression of a man who genuinely didn't know what to do with her, not because she was difficult, because she was steady in a way he was not accustomed to, because she kept showing up to hard conversations without any armor and asking direct questions and waiting for direct answers. "Cumin called you," he said, "not a question." "Yes." He nodded slowly. He looked at the table for a moment. When he looked back up, he had arranged whatever he was feeling into something quieter. "He is my brother," he said, "and I love him the way you love someone who keeps making choices you can't follow, and you have long since accepted that. But taking Yina's name and making it into a warning for you," he stopped. "That is not love for you. That is a man trying to protect something he has already lost." "I know," she said. "He is watching something he didn't value become something he can't stop thinking about," Yunho said, "and he doesn't know how to do that quietly." She held his gaze. "The table is still standing," she said, "in Seongbuk-dong." He looked at her for a moment. "It's Friday," she said. He stood up. "Get your jacket," he said. "Meanwhile, and I really want you to stay with this part, Cumin was coming apart in the particular, quiet way that men come apart when they realize that the thing they didn't protect has become the thing they cannot stop reaching for. He showed up at her office building one afternoon, just to talk, he said. He had clearly prepared something. She came downstairs, looked at him standing on the pavement and said, "Cumin, I don't have anything I need to hear from you. Sila, just give me. You should go." She turned around and went back upstairs. He stood there, then he got in his car. Then he sat in the car for a while before he drove. He went to his parents' house that evening because some part of him still believed that family could repair what personal choices had broken. His mother made tea. His father sat. And eventually Cumin said, "She's with Yunho." His mother was quiet. "I know," his father said. "You knew. Your mother mentioned it." Cumin looked at the two people who had watched Sila come into their home, who had held her hand across dinner tables, whose mother had texted her after everything fell apart just to say, "I hope you're eating well. Come for dinner if you want." No sides, no performance, just warmth that had started before any of this and saw no reason to end. And he understood something he hadn't wanted to understand. She hadn't just left him. She had stayed, just somewhere else entirely. His mother reached across and put her hand on his. "She is a good woman," she said softly. "I know," Cumin said. His voice was flat, not angry, just emptied of something. "Then you know," his father said, "that this is what happens." He tried one final time. A message, long, carefully assembled. It restructured the entire history of what had happened between them in a way that made Cumin the one failed by circumstances, by impulse, by timing, by everything in the world except his own choices. It was genuinely impressive in a construction sense. She could see the effort in it. She read it once. She deleted it. 30 minutes later she was at the restaurant in Seongbuk-dong, in their booth, with the peonies on the table and the food arriving exactly right, telling Yunho about the message. He listened. "What do you want to do about it?" he asked. She thought for exactly one moment. "Nothing," she said. "I want to eat my food, go home, and give it not one more thought for the rest of my life." He looked at her across the table. "Good answer," he said quietly. She smiled. He reached across and took her hand, and she let him, and the restaurant moved quietly around them, and the peonies were white, and Seoul was doing whatever Seoul does at night outside the window, and she thought about a grocery store on a Saturday morning, about a mango, about a split second, about an elderly woman and a jar on a high shelf and a man who stopped. She thought about a street covered in flowers, and a card with 4 words and house slippers she hadn't even noticed she was wearing. She thought about standing in a doorway and choosing not to say leave. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking about." She looked at him across that table, this complicated, patient, completely unreasonable man, with his 41 weeks and his standing reservation, and the one real smile that rearranged the atmosphere of any room it entered, and she said, "I almost didn't come that morning. I had my keys in my hand and I almost put them back." He was very still. "I'm glad you didn't," he said. "I know," she said. "You've been glad since the grocery store." Something moved quietly through his eyes. "Since the grocery store," he confirmed. She squeezed his hand across the table. "Sometimes I still wait for the other shoe to drop," she admitted. "Because the last time someone gave me flowers, it ended in 4 seconds in a doorway." He looked at her across the table for a long moment. "The last time someone gave you flowers," he said quietly, "it was the wrong person." He turned her hand over in his. "These ones were always yours." "Don't tell Cumin I said this," she said, "but his terrible decisions have genuinely excellent consequences." Yunho looked at the ceiling for exactly 2 seconds, in the manner of a man trying very hard not to laugh. He didn't succeed. "Now your comment for today, and I genuinely want to know, so go straight to the comments and drop it. At what point did Cumin actually lose her? Not the night she found him, that was the ending. But when was the real moment? Was it the grocery store, when he got the number she should have given to someone else? Was it the engagement party, when he was on his phone while she was helping clean up after her own celebration? Was it the cafe with his brother, when he said she never laughed like that with me and heard it come out of his own mouth? Because I think Cumin didn't lose Sela in one moment. He lost her in every small moment before she had anything to compare it to. Tell me where you think it happened. And if this story took you all the way from those flowers on a Tuesday morning to this last line right here, share it with someone. Not for the channel, for them. Because we all know someone who needed to hear the part about the table that was waiting. Subscribe to Afro-Soul Diaries by D if you are not subscribed yet. Leave this video a like, and I will see you in the next one.